My name's Josh. I am the ByteSpeed Gravity Gaming Solutions Director here. So I'm in charge of all of our esports activations, and I'm going to serve as your moderator for today. So if you have stuff that pops up as you go through the kind of hour, 45 minutes to an hour that we have, feel free to dump those questions down below, and I'll make sure that Lee is able to answer those. For those of you that are watching the YouTube recording, please drop your questions and stuff in the comments below. We'll check that and try and get a hold of you after the fact. All of the recording and stuff will get sent out via email when we're done today. So you'll have the link straight to that YouTube video once it's posted live on the ByteSpeed YouTube channel. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Lee here from Lenovo, and he'll be your main presenter today. Lee, take it away. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Josh. And I'm really glad to see folks joining the chat here as well. As Josh said, please drop your questions in. I love getting those answered in the moment when they're really pressing on your mind. It looks like everyone's here for pretty much the same reason. Number one, we're interested in esports, whether that be expanding what we already have or getting started from scratch. And obviously, we are approaching today's conversation around what solutions and hardware can enable a mobile solution around gaming. A little bit about myself. So I'm the North American esports specialist for Lenovo. I cut my teeth in esports, so to speak, at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where I spent 15 years as an IT director. And while I'm going to show you some photos of what we built there, I want to stress that, again, today's conversation is about the different varieties of esports and how we can continue to expand the ecosystem and the community across the country by approaching it a little bit differently. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that for a couple of years, what you're seeing on the screen now was sort of the expectation of esports, is that we had to dump a ton of money into these dedicated labs to get the attention of our students, both in higher ed and in K-12. We had to, frankly, spend a lot more on the physical space than we did on the hardware, the gaming machines, or the console stations. And there was a lot of opportunity in that. And there still is, of course. I always would love to see at least one space in each district, for example, to where we could bring students together and give them a purpose-built space. But the reality is that we just don't have that type of resource in most places, but we still have the demand from our gamers and our students. What we are hopeful is that in whatever format or flavor of esports that we implement at schools, that we are achieving a community building atmosphere, that we're really driving towards a resource that engages our students, both as a gamer and building a better community around the gamer, as well as the extracurricular and educational opportunities that may bring. What you're seeing on the screen now is an example of where we can really build an incubation around esports, and it's what we did at UNC Chapel Hill. We built a space after a lot of back and forth of saying, what can we do with esports? Is it going to draw the students in? And then how do we get the students to build and make this more sustainable? So what you're seeing here are our students stepping up and saying, well, I want to host first newbie nights, or I want to host a viewing party in the space. And I want to build the community beyond that dedicated gamer. A little bit zoom out, let's establish some baseline understandings of how we see the industry. So number one, when we're talking about esports is a very tiny portion of the overall gaming community. And there is a pretty big transition financially into what that may mean. And it's why when we implement esports at schools, we want to make sure that we're giving the exposure and the opportunity to engage beyond sitting at a PC station and just playing a game competitively. We want to make sure that we are teaching all of the extra pieces like video production or event management, business management, development and fundraising for events around what we're doing. Because frankly, esports professionals make up a very tiny portion. There's over 3 billion folks in the world who identify as gamers. And to be clear, you're probably a gamer if you're in this presentation. A gamer is defined by anyone who does any sort of game on an electronic device, and that could even be a cell phone. But esports professionals make up a very tiny portion. There's fewer than 5,600 esports professionals in the US, defined as someone who makes the majority of their income by competing in gaming and winning, driving that income. So what we're talking about in EDU is really flipping that. And we're going to focus on a very little portion of, frankly, what the varsity teams are doing. We want to make sure we expand well past that into an ecosystem for our schools that's hitting the CTE pathways. We're building community, and ultimately, this is going to help us drive attendance growth and outcomes in academics. So just an example here is what can change the dynamic at a school by implementing an esports team and driving that community around them. What you just saw was a school, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm sorry, I travel around the country on a pretty regular basis. I'm pretty sure that's one of our schools in Georgia, where they have never won a state title in any sport whatsoever. But they started an esports program 2 years ago, and they've really built that community around their students, where they have built a shoutcasting team. They've really driven attention to their esports teams. They put a lot of time into the coaching. By the way, the coaches there are other students, and they ended up winning a state title. Those students became the most popular kids in school walking there through the hallway. And in a lot of ways, that was a social community that built up around that competitive team. So there's two aspects automatically that we're able to achieve. And in getting that visibility and that success, the school then reinvested and started building out more resources for the CTE and STEM labs. Ultimately, though, not having that resource space to be able to dedicate. So instead, they're using a lot of Legion laptops to expand the program and provide portability and flexibility in how they're approaching it. Because ultimately, our goal is not to segment the outcome, it's to combine all three. And so we want to make sure, sorry, I'm having a little delay on my slide here. There we go. We want to make sure that we're hitting all three of those aspects. So in gaming overall, want to acknowledge again that mobile solutions, meaning notebooks, is actually the vast majority of the business. We see over 80% of our sales for Legion, and this transcribes across HP Omen, Alienware from Dell, MSI. For all of us, the majority of our business is actually mobile. And so we spend a lot more time in the development of mobile. You actually get a better outcome ROI on the price for a mobile unit. That said, in EDU, we are seeing that slowly shift towards mobile as we've caught up. Like I said at the beginning, when we first started esports, probably about 7 years ago in higher ed, and it's filtered down into K-12 over the years, we thought that the flavor had to be a dedicated lab. And as we've shifted that mentality or started to expand the offerings to accommodate those who don't have that resource, either financially or with space, then we've started seeing the mobile unit or mobile solution within esports EDU continue to grow. And right now it's at about 40% of the business, but we see that tick up about 9 to 10% per year. And so as we do that, we start to see these solutions fit into any type of space. And this is one of our customers in Bakersfield, California. It's one of my favorite places to go to really play around with what esports could look like in a solution that is not fixed, but it's fitting into all of the classes and the schools around the district. This is actually an innovation center that the district owns, and they have a lot of large spaces within this facility. There are dedicated classrooms. They even have a dentistry school, for example, in this facility, but they don't have a dedicated esports lab in any of their schools. What they do decide is they're going to use laptops to achieve exposure to all students across the district. And they use charging carts. I'll show you a little bit about that in a moment. They bring those around to all of their schools to kind of drive the competition around the school year. And then twice a year, they bus in all of their students to their innovation center. They set up all of the laptops in various rooms like this. and they drive an Overwatch tournament at once a year. They do a Rocket League tournament. There's a lot of things that we've learned working with them about better ways to have this outcome. So they make sure that all of their students are participating in various ways throughout the year. They're finding ways to get engaged, even if they're not interested in being the gamer specifically. And the outcome is it's almost like a senior design project. They are putting on this tournament and the students are running it. And we're starting to see that replicated in a lot of places around the country. Here's another view of how Kern kind of moves into another classroom. You'll just see a different format. The previous one was more of an auditorium where they'd set up four station desk or tables around the room. This is more of a standard classroom environment. And then ultimately at the end of the day, they're in the boardroom or the theater of the Innovation Center. And here they do use desktop towers, but we've seen a lot of schools start to shift that model as well. So I'll show you a couple of examples of how we accommodate mobile PCs within these tournament spaces. One other one from California is Valverde USD in Paris, California. This is another great example of how, while what you just saw was Kern High School USD, this is Valverde, which has elementary, middle, and high school that they cover. They bring together all of their students in April every year for a massive community tournament of 500 students and all of their parents and community members. What you're seeing in this room is a mixture of desktops that they bring in from all of their schools, as well as a fleet of laptops. And it's all designed, the laptops, they are used on a regular daily basis as workstation units effectively for graphic design, for other aspects around textile design, business management, 3D animation. And then the afternoon, they're using them for esports programs. And they sometimes move them to the cafeteria, sometimes leave them in the classroom, but they're flexible so that they can offer that compatibility with whatever the teacher needs for their class. And so I guess the question is figuring out what's right for you. And a lot of the reasons why we switched to mobile is around these three aspects. Number one, space constraints. We know that attendance varies across the country. So you might have an attendance issue on the positive side of you're running out of space and you have more students coming into your district. And in that case, obviously, you're not going to be able to give up an entire classroom to dedicate PCs for gaming. Or maybe you have the opposite effect where attendance is sliding and you need to attract those students in. And that might be where you do decide to commit space. We make sure that all of our mobile options fit within the educational space with solutions built around it to manage it. We're going to, again, expand into those solutions in a moment. Budget considerations being another big factor. It can be cost prohibitive to invest in a dedicated PC tower, monitor, and that physical space. What you saw at UNC, for example, was roughly $150,000 worth of computer equipment and over $1 million worth of facility renovation. That can really explode a budget. And if we don't know that we can commit that resource, it's a lot more cost effective to invest in mobile units like notebooks, where we can shift the use of those notebooks if we need to, if we decide that the program is not going to work for us necessarily, or more frequently, we see that those notebooks are simply used for various different activities beyond having them in a dedicated space. And so we're getting a bigger ROI for that investment. And that leads into flexible learning. So what is your goal for the esports program? Is it to attract students and increase attendance? Is it to build community and give your students a space to grow and connect with each other? Or are you also going to be using that as an investment in resources that drive towards outcomes in other classes like CTE or STEM labs? And again, flexibility is very helpful in that as we maybe move things around to different schools or campuses. We want to make sure that those devices are going to be manageable and still give us the outcome we need and the reliability. So at Lenovo, we've featured two different versions, so to speak, of mobile gaming. We are one of several companies that have expanded into the handheld mobile gaming space. About a year and a half ago, we announced the Legion Go 1, which you see on your screen now. I'll expand to that in a second. And then, of course, we have our Legion notebooks, which is going to be the largest and most common purchase that a school will do. Now, there's a dramatic shift in the price, obviously, between the two units here. The handheld on the left is roughly on the high end, $700, whereas the notebook starts at $1,100 and goes all the way up to $4,000. You don't necessarily need that top of the line notebook. I want to stress that. We're going to look at a couple of different options and talk about what type of notebooks might achieve your goals. Just to focus on the handheld device for a moment, though. So we're very proud of our Legion Go handheld. There are a couple of competitors on the market. I like to be very transparent. There's the MSI Claw, the Asus Rock Ally. They're fantastic devices. We think we excel in every aspect, though, with our device. We're the only ones with removable controllers that allow for a docking station as well. Very similar aspect and hand feel as a Nintendo Switch, which students are obviously very familiar with. We have a much larger screen, better resolution, better processor, better battery life across the board. We think we have a better product. And the nice thing is that these are almost all Windows based. We do have a SteamOS version that I'll show you a photo of in a moment. But the nice thing is that you can put Windows Pro on these and manage them like any other managed device at a price point where these can be offered for students in your competitive teams to take home and practice. They can be used as an expansion option. So let's say you have a small lab with dedicated PCs, but occasionally you want to expand that capacity. We've seen a lot of schools shift to using these mobile handheld units to offer that additional capacity without taking up a lot of storage space or having that extra investment of multiple laptops. And then this has been a pretty big shift that we've seen over the past 3 to 6 months is the investment in these mobile handheld units as actual gaming stations and not just, a flexible unit that a student can go and pick up. So with the docking station, you can connect HDMI, Ethernet, and all of your accessories and set it up just as you would any other tournament space. I just had a school last week, for example, that bought 20 of these with docking stations, and that is going to be their tournament space device. So in other words, on a large format area, they have 20 stations with the docking stations permanently set there. And then they put the mobile units or the handheld units in a charging cart. The students check them out, plug them in when they want to sit there and compete. But otherwise, it's up to the student and the coach where they take those devices to use as a handheld device for practice. And it makes it a lot easier for storage and for managing those. And I mentioned that we have a couple of different flavors. So there are now 2 Windows versions in our fleet of handhelds, the Legion Go 1 and the Go S. And then we have a Go S with SteamOS. The 2 on the right, actually the one on the far right is shipping on May 25th. The one in the middle, there's 2 versions. One is out now. The other one ships May 25th. There's a couple of different variations on these. The removable controllers is only available on the Go 1 and eventually the Go 2 later this summer. But I want to stress that we're seeing a lot of interest across the board here. There's a lot of schools who have decided that the SteamOS version, for example, is a better investment. We have a lot of pre-sales on that. We're very excited to see that. Valve is working with us to help with management of those devices the same as you would with Windows management on the other devices. If you have any interest in this and you want to try a demo, please reach out through your ByteSpeed rep and we'll work together to get you a loaner of these. I think you'll find it's a really interesting option to try for mobile gaming. But let's shift over a little bit and talk about the tried and true approach to mobile labs in our schools, which is the notebook. So what you're seeing here is next generation products. So these have all well, they're not all announced, to be completely honest with you. So this is a little bit of a preview. In fact, you'll see in that 4th column, I don't have a part number for it yet. And pricing is fluid at the moment, I would say it that way. We've had several meetings, again, in the interest of transparency, and depending upon when you may watch this playback, you'll have known that there's been a lot of change in tariffs and the approach of the federal government and what might impact our access and pricing for product. what we're very excited and have always done for a very long time is diversify our manufacturing line. So we're pretty resilient to tariffs and to supply. So you should not have a concern about that with working with Lenovo for your notebooks. What you're seeing here is through a lot of research and working with our customers to figure out what makes the most sense for the vast majority of our customers. And it's what pretty much every company and manufacturer does. For education, we bring that down and focus into a couple of different units that give us a range. And so as you're looking at this chart from left to right, you're looking at what we would consider a professional entry model all the way up to the extreme power professional model. And most of our K-12 schools, quite frankly, you are not going to need anything more powerful than the first, second, or third column here. The majority of esports programs are playing just games. Rocket League, League of Legends, Marvel Rivals is huge and has taken off since December when it came out. Overwatch 2 in some schools, Valorant in some schools, Hearthstone, etc. None of those games will ever exceed the capabilities of these first three units. And in fact, in the newest generation of NVIDIA RTX GeForce graphics cards, the 50 series as we call it, the 5060 is just as powerful as the 4070 and 4080, sort of right in the middle of the two, for a much lower price point, frankly. And so you're going to see a lot of power out of these, and you're going to see better power efficiency out of the Intel Ultra or Core Ultra CPUs. And so what you get in sort of the cumulative average here is a very powerful laptop, very efficient cooling, OLED screens on all of our devices. So you actually get the best color representation and picture quality out of our notebooks compared to your average gaming monitor. And then I want to stress that it's very important that no matter who you go with in your purchase decision, that you want to make sure you're getting that warranty and coverage plan. And so working with ByteSpeed and Lenovo, we have the Lenovo Ultimate Support or Legion Ultimate Support warranty on all of our devices. On notebooks specifically, we have a 3-year warranty. I think that's incredibly important when we talk about who is going to be utilizing these devices and how they are handled and transported. So we have accidental damage protection and warranty where we have next day on-site repair or replacement of our devices. I am very proud to say that over the past 2.5 years, I've only seen one claim on a notebook repair for Legion, which, knock on wood, stays a very low number. But I do know from experience that our response rate is phenomenal on answering questions. So that support is not only for repair, but it's really any technical question you have on your gaming device, whether that be I'm running, and this is a very common one, I'm running Valorant and I'm having an issue with secure boot and tokens and getting the anti-cheat program to work. We have a dedicated team of engineering professionals who are always available 24/7, 365. You can call them up with that kind of technical question, and that is specifically what they are knowledgeable and able to answer for you. So I want to stress that because you should not have to just figure this out on your own. If this is not what you're accustomed to, especially these professional and larger notebooks, we want to make sure you have that support. And also, I know the pricing is not showing up here. I can give you a rough estimate on what that first column is going to be. It's likely going to be around $1,600. And then you'll see the one on the far right is priced at $4,100. And that's a pretty significant shift from left to right. The schools that are purchasing the fourth and the fifth column are the schools that are doing the extreme computing. So they maybe are doing a virtual reality lab, and we might pair that with MetaQuest headsets to build a virtual environment. Or they're doing 3D design in Unreal Academy, for example. Whereas on the far left, our schools are doing the games that I mentioned before, or maybe even in elementary and middle school, they're doing a Minecraft education. And so most schools are investing in those first couple of columns. I don't want to scare you away based on pricing. The reality is that these are a very affordable option and actually overall are less expensive than investing in a desktop PC station. Now, I've talked about managing these devices several times. So I want to acknowledge that there are some dedicated and purpose-built solutions for managing these devices. So with JAR systems, we have co-manufactured and designed what we call the Legion Power Pro charging cart. And it's obviously here on the screen, I'm going to show you a little bit different representation of this as a breakaway with the features. So number one, very similar to a Chromebook charging cart, you have dedicated space for each of your devices. In this particular scenario, we have 12 pull-out drawers that accommodate up to a 17-inch notebook. And so it is designed for Legion notebooks, but it works perfectly fine with all of our mobile workstations if you want more of a CTO or custom build option within the mobile unit space. Each of those drawers has space for a mouse as well. It has an indicator light for each level that's showing the charging rate or status, as well as a very colorful set of lighting bars inside as well to match that Legion aesthetic that we really love and draws into the gaming industry. It has hooks on the top for other accessories and a shelf for extra keyboards if you would like to keep those in as well. Now, the benefit of this is I'm able to store all of my notebooks and leave them powered on. So part of the engineering that we went through was making sure that it's delivering exactly the right amount of wattage through a USB-C connector to these notebooks to power them, keep them fully charged, and allow it to be not too much power so that we don't activate the graphics card in the machine and start to generate additional heat on each drawer. I'm able to then remotely connect and manage and update these devices overnight, for example, keep them secure in the cart, and then very easily pull this cart around to different classes or load it up and take it to different school sites. Now, in the gaming space, I think that portability, security is a very big concern. So I'm very excited about this cart. I want to also share in just a few moments about that management and update process, because it can be incredibly overwhelming to keep all of our games up to date, as well as Windows patching when we're not on dedicated, always plugged in stations. But before I do that, also want to acknowledge, I mentioned the charging is exactly the right amount over USB-C to keep these powered on. So that's another aspect where we've gone with our customers to really drive into what is causing the biggest headache. And one of those things is, I think, a completely fair piece of feedback, in that our power bricks are massive, heavy, and for the type of user, let's say an 8th grader, to be picking up this 330 watt power supply and managing that or keeping storage of those, it's a bit much. And so pairing with the charging cart, we've seen a lot of schools invest in our what we call Legion Slim charger. It's only 140 watts, but anything up to a 5070 graphics card will still fully power off of this smaller unit, and anything above a 5070 will simply dynamically throttle the graphics card if need be. But for most schools, if you are practicing or competing with a fully charged unit and the 140 watt power supply, you're going to get 3 hours of gaming out of that, no problem, which is more than enough, and the daily recommended limit for gaming for our students. And so for a much lower cost and half the weight, you do have that option to have a more student-friendly charging brick to use for your gaming laptops. And then, as I showed you previously in a slide around the gaming handheld, we do have schools that take these devices and then connect them to all the peripheral devices. So I want to just quickly take you through a couple of the other options around esports, or the accessories and visuals, as we call them, and tell you why I might recommend different versions here. So within monitors, obviously a lot of different sizes. We're ranging from 24.5 to 44.5 inch monitors. In fact, I'm connecting to you today and looking at that 44.5 inch monitor. I think it's fantastic for a production station. And a lot of schools might have that mobile cart full of laptops, but they might have one dedicated station in a teacher's classroom, for example, to do some shoutcasting and video editing design. So the larger monitors are designed for that. It gives you a lot of screen real estate to do AutoCAD, video editing, graphic editing. But for the most part, if we are building a station and maybe having an extra monitor to plug into a laptop for a competitive station, we're going to focus on that 24.5-inch monitor. So that 25i or 25f. And the reason for that is very practical. Is looking at the screen, I am trying to not move my physical eyesight any more around the screen than I need to, because as soon as I move my eyeballs, then I am slowing down my response time. And so I'm trying to just focus directly in the center, and any more additional space or physical length left to right, I'm going to have to move my eyes. And so that any professional player around the world will always choose the 24 or 25-inch monitor. But for a lot of schools building social spaces and wanting some flexibility and maybe utilizing these stations for a bit more than just gaming, then 27 is the most popular model. And there's a couple of different flavors. I think personally that curved or non-curved is more of a personal preference than any real advantage. I don't think having curved below 27 makes any sense. That's not a big enough panel to warrant having curved, but we do have a fantastic option there. And that 27FC for a curved monitor at 27 inches and the 32 above. In terms of IPS or VA, just some things to note for you. VA panel has gotten a little bit of a bad rep in the past for creating what we call black tearing or streaking, especially within gaming that requires a high refresh rate. Our monitors stand sort of as a superior level within the market. That response time being under a millisecond response time completely negates what would have caused the black tearing. And so they're effectively the same quality of monitor between the IPS, which is better color reproduction, and the VA panel, which can produce a better response time or refresh rate for around the same price point. So it ultimately comes down to what you prefer. Most gamers choosing a side-by-side of our models or choosing the VA panels for the higher refresh rate. Around accessories that you might connect to these laptops or handheld gaming devices, a couple of different flavors in the Legion lineup, all of them matching the aesthetic and having software that helps manage the color and coordination of all of these devices and customization of their features. We don't do 100 different keyboards. We try to focus down on exactly a few differentiators, for example. So what you're seeing here is a membrane keyboard and then 2 mechanical. Now, the membrane is going to be a lot quieter in your K-12 space. It's my preference personally. It's what I use on the daily basis. Whereas the mechanical keyboard is going to be that more competitive edge device. A mechanical keyboard has a higher travel in the keys. It's more tactile, it's definitely louder click, and it's going to have a more precise response to the movement of the key than a membrane keyboard would. And there's really just one small difference between the one in the middle and on the right, and that's the one on the right is called a 10 keyless or a mini. It's actually a 70% keyboard, so it's losing the number pad. The vast majority of students and players do not use the number pad ever within their game. There are a few exceptions to that rule, some that will point out the arrow keys, which are still present on the 10 keyless, but you focus more on mouse movement and mouse space on your desk station. So removing the number pad gives you a lot more flexibility and movement space for competitive gaming. But if you're going to use these for multi-purpose labs, then I definitely recommend going with a full-size keyboard. Couple of things to think about within the rest of the accessories. The biggest thing I can tell you is never do wireless, period. Especially when we're talking about mobile gaming, where we are not having a dedicated space where the mouse stays specifically with a particular device. Number one, you will have interference, and we don't want to mix up these wireless dongles. So all of our mice have a wired option, and I strongly would recommend that you stick with that wired option. And from left to right, I would say that the value option of the M210 is perfectly fine, and vast majority of our customers find that this is more than adequate, especially for that middle school range, and some high schools will shift up a little bit into the M300. Very valuable value priced options here for our mobile mice. For the headsets, exactly the same message here is stick with wired. And so that's why I'm focusing in on the H300. The other key differentiator here among its peers on this graph is that it's a unidirectional mic. And so while the H500 is my personal favorite for at-home use, it has an omnidirectional mic, which means it's picking up all of the audio around the microphone. If I'm sitting 3 to 4 feet from my teammate and I'm talking loudly, or frankly, you don't have to talk that loudly for an omnidirectional mic, my neighbor's headset is going to pick up my voice. And so I'm going to hear my voice echoed in my neighbor's comm. Instead, with a unidirectional mic, it's only going to pick up the sound it's pointed at. So it's going to pick up my voice and nothing else in the area, and it's giving me a much more isolated and clean feel. All right, and the last big thing that I want to cover is around management of these devices. So aside from physically managing them in a charging cart, the other thing we have to think about, especially with our IT groups, is how am I going to keep these stations secure and up to date? And you can certainly put them on Active Directory, for example, with the vast majority of mobile devices being Windows-based. And that's a fine example. If we were talking about just a regular classroom and maybe we were only running Adobe and Microsoft software on these laptops, then you're not really going to have a big overhead. It's going to be like managing any other device. The reality is, though, in gaming, is that games update every single week, not every month. And there is no such thing as a prepackaged or a package ready for SCCM or Intune when it comes to gaming. You're going to have to manually update these machines. And so let's say you have 10 or 20 laptops. We're talking about having to open every laptop, having to manually sign in to each of the gaming platforms or game launchers like Epic Games, and then running the updates and waiting for those to finish. And game updates are on average 2 gigs or more per station. So that's a really big time suck when it comes to our limited IT staff resources. The other thing that we're considering is, how do I make sure that we sort of tailor in, pull down a bit on what are my students accessing on these machines? And certainly we can pair things with LAN school, for example, to minimize the access to different ports or websites if we give them a regular Windows device. But the reality is we really want to pull that down even more. And so, for example, if we're playing Rocket League, that has to go through the Epic Games launcher. I don't want my student suddenly installing 3 other games from Epic Games just simply because they logged in through Epic Games to play. It's a distraction, and I don't have the same sort of comfort level or security around all of the other games that are available from these publishers. And so with a solution like Senate by Anestec, which is very similar, and want to point out, if you've heard of GG Circuit and their products, GG Rock and GG Leap, there's some crossover here in the different platforms. But we're currently working with Senate software because it provides all of that security. It helps us provide login credentials, locks down exactly what our students are able to do. We are able to see what our students are doing on these machines, and it is automatically running updates on all of the games and Windows patches for you on these mobile gaming stations. A much better management platform than doing things the typical way. I'm not going to be going into a full demo of this just in the interest of time today, but we're always happy to set up a personalized demo call so you can see how the software would work for you. And so just pulling it in a little bit, I'm a little ahead of schedule, but I wanted to make sure that we offer some time to go down into specific questions or maybe what you're considering for your school. There's my contact information here as well. And obviously Josh and everyone at ByteSpeed is who I would refer you to first as well, because there's a lot more that I'm only focusing in on the Lenovo product here, but there's a lot in the ecosystem to implement an esports program. So we want to make sure we're giving you customized solutions for anything at your school. So if we could, are there any
Yeah, we
questions?
had 2 questions, or I guess one question come through just a little bit ago. Can you talk a little bit about cost on those jar charging carts?
Yep. So list price is $2,000. I can promise you they're pretty aggressively priced once we get them quoted for you. I'm not able to give you a specific quote over a call, but list price is $2,000 per cart.
Awesome. And is there any just a personal kind of follow-up question to that? Is it just the 12 unit size, or is there different sizes that go with those?
It's just the 12 unit size, and the reason for that is a charging limit or power limit per cart. So we're delivering 69 watts of power per drawer, and once you add that up, just to make sure that it can be accommodated on any circuit grid in any particular location, we're limiting it to 12 for weight, size, and power.
Awesome. Thanks. And anybody else that's in attendance today, feel free to throw your questions down either in the Q&A or the chat. We've got a little bit of time here for Q&A. If you've still got questions, like Lee said, feel free to reach out to us here at ByteSpeed, and we can get kind of like a one-on-one call scheduled where we can bring Lee in to talk about all the great options that Lenovo has out there, and we can focus a little bit more about what your school individually is looking for. If you go to the ByteSpeed website and our esports page, it's bytespeed.com/gravity gaming. We can book one-on-one meetings through there. We'd be happy to sit down and meet with you. And like I said, have a more kind of one-on-one call to talk about your specific needs and use case. And I think one of the cool things about having a partnership with Lenovo for ByteSpeed here is that we have options for almost any scenario. Like Lee mentioned at the beginning of the presentation today, back in the day, when we first started with the big wave of esports, it was building out these big giant labs and trying to find classroom space that we could convert. And as everybody knows, that's space is always a premium, and having a flexible option that you can set up and tear down or move throughout the district is super important, and just gives those opportunities to kids that you might not have available, if you're looking for a permanent home in the building. So really want to thank Lee for jumping on and sharing his expertise today. I'm not seeing any other questions come through. So Lee, if there's anything that you want to kind of say for closing thoughts to leave us with today.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I apologize for missing this slide. When my presentation sort of had a hiccup, it skipped over this slide. So I did want to just share this visual with you and this list of examples. When I shared with you a photo of Alberta USD, what I didn't expand on is that's been about 5 years in the making, that we've been working with them closely along with Intel to really use them as an incubation school to figure out what can we do with mobile gaming to achieve a lot of pathway classes and programs within our school. So I just wanted to share with you this example. These are some of the 24 classes that run in that district, and all of which guide and input into that final gaming tournament that they host for their community. You'll see there's some creative ways that these classes are connecting. So sports medicine has an overlap into this space for obvious reasons, but audio tech, theater, and etc. So if you need some inspiration specifically around how do I expand the use and ROI of esports in my school, feel free to reach out and we can brainstorm together based on what you already are doing and how we might overlap that into esports, and then how we might then use that as a reach to further build.
I think it's also important to kind of note that a lot of that cross-curricular type stuff, there's funding available for devices out there. A large majority of the schools that we work with are utilizing CTE funding, whether that's through something like a Carl Perkins grant or inter-district funds that are built around those classes. Getting the equipment that can kind of both do the curriculum work and the stuff in the classroom during the day, and then at 3 o'clock when school is done, flip over to be your great gaming machines. It helps kind of ease the funding burden a little bit to be able to kind of use multiple buckets of money to help get things off the ground. So another great tie-in to kind of help get you started as you move towards kind of a dependable budget long term. So yeah, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Like I said, the recording will get emailed out either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Look for it on our YouTube channel. It's just ByteSpeed MN on YouTube. And thanks again, Lee, for jumping in and being our guest speaker today. I really appreciate it. And if anybody wants to meet individually, please get in touch with Lee or myself or anybody at ByteSpeed. We'd be happy to meet with you. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.